It was a bright afternoon in the small city of Greenport. The streets were filled with the smell of roasted coffee, car engines, and laughter from people heading to lunch. In the middle of the busy square stood Marley's Dine-In, a restaurant known for its quick service and friendly atmosphere. Inside, customers filled every table, talking softly over clinking glasses and the sound of cutlery. Among the busy waiters was Nina, a young woman who had been working at Marley's for almost a year. She was fast, confident, and known for her sharp tongue when things got stressful. Nina believed she could handle anything that came her way. She loved her job but hated rude or demanding customers. That day she didn't know her temper was about to lead her into the biggest mistake of her life. In the corner of the restaurant, near the window, sat Mara, a quiet woman in her mid-30s. She had a calm face and warm eyes, and she wore a soft beige dress. Her movements were gentle, and she seemed lost in her own thoughts as she looked outside. There was a hint of sadness on her face, like someone waiting for something or someone. Mara wasn't from Greenport. She had arrived 2 days ago and checked into a nearby hotel. No one knew much about her except that she carried herself with quiet grace. Even the restaurant manager, Mr. Reeves, had noticed her polite manners and kind voice when she placed her order the first time she visited. Nina had seen Mara before. She remembered her from the previous evening, sitting alone in the same seat, ordering tea and salad, barely speaking. Nina found it strange that someone so quiet visited a place full of noise. That afternoon, the restaurant was unusually crowded. Orders were delayed and the kitchen was short on staff. Nina rushed from one table to another, balancing trays and taking notes. Her patience was already wearing thin. When she reached Mara's table, she forced a smile. "Good afternoon. What will you have today?" Mara looked up gently. "Just a cup of tea, please. And maybe your soup of the day." Nina nodded quickly. "Sure, it'll be out soon." But as time passed, the kitchen grew slower. Orders piled up and Nina's stress turned into irritation. She accidentally mixed up 2 tables, forgot an order, and spilled coffee on the counter. When she finally brought Mara's soup, it was lukewarm. Mara looked at the bowl, then at Nina. "Excuse me," she said softly. "The soup is cold. Could you please replace it?" Her voice wasn't rude. It was calm and polite, but something about the timing made Nina lose her temper. She had been dealing with several impatient customers already, and Mara's quiet tone somehow made her feel criticized. Nina frowned. "It's not that cold." "You can still eat it," Mara blinked in surprise. "I'm sorry, but it really is cold. I don't mean to trouble you, but could you please get it warmed up?" A few nearby customers turned their heads. Nina felt embarrassed and defensive. "Fine," she said, grabbing the bowl and walking away faster than necessary. When she returned, she placed the new bowl a little too hard on the table. "Here," she said shortly. Mara didn't respond with anger. She simply gave a small nod and whispered, "Thank you." For some reason, her calmness annoyed Nina even more. The young waitress felt like she was being silently judged even though Mara hadn't said anything wrong. Half an hour later, when Mara asked for the check, Nina's tone was still sharp. She dropped the bill on the table with a quick hand and didn't look up. Mr. Reeves noticed her attitude and frowned. He prided himself on running a respectful place. "Nina," he said quietly as she passed the counter, "be polite to every customer no matter what. You never know who they are." But Nina only sighed. "She's just another picky guest. It's fine." As Mara paid and stood up to leave, she smiled faintly at Mr. Reeves. "Thank you. The food was nice." Her words made Nina pause for a second. Even after everything, the woman was still kind. It made Nina feel an odd mix of guilt and stubborn pride. She didn't apologize, though. She simply cleared the table as soon as Mara walked out. Outside, Mara walked down the street, her calm steps hiding the storm inside her mind. She wasn't someone who liked confrontation, and she had never expected such behavior in a peaceful place like this. Still, she decided not to make a complaint. Later that evening, as the sun set over the city, a black car stopped in front of Marley's Dine-In. The engine purred quietly, and a tall man in a dark suit stepped out. His name was Darren, and his expression was cold but controlled. He looked around before entering the restaurant. Inside, the staff froze for a moment. Darren's presence carried quiet power, the kind that made people straighten their posture without knowing why. He approached the counter where Mr. Reeves stood. "Good evening," he said in a calm tone. "My wife was here earlier today." Mr. Reeves nodded politely. Yes, sir. May I ask if there was any problem? Darren smiled faintly. No problem. I just wanted to know the name of the waitress who served her. The room went silent. Nina, standing nearby, suddenly felt her heart beat faster. Mr. Reeves hesitated. That would be Nina, sir. Is everything all right? Darren's eyes shifted toward Nina. His gaze wasn't angry, but it carried a depth that made her feel small. Everything is fine. I just came to speak to her. He walked slowly to her station. Nina tried to stay calm, but her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the napkins on a nearby table. I believe you served my wife today, Darren said quietly. Yes, sir, Nina replied, forcing a smile. She was very kind. I hope everything was fine with her meal. Darren studied her face for a moment before answering. She said the soup was cold, but she didn't mind. She said she liked the place. Nina nodded, unsure of what to say. Darren leaned slightly forward. You're lucky she's kind. Most people would have reacted differently. She values peace more than pride. You should remember that. Nina swallowed hard. I understand, sir. He gave a slight nod and turned to leave. Good, then learn from it. Kindness is not weakness. When he stepped out, the whole restaurant seemed to exhale in relief. Mr. Reeves gave Nina a long look. Do you understand now? He asked quietly. Nina nodded again, this time with real humility. Yes, sir. I do. That night, as she walked home under the dim streetlights, Nina couldn't stop thinking about Mara's calm eyes and the quiet warning in her husband's voice. For the first time, she realized how small actions could carry big consequences. Even when no one raises their voice, she promised herself to be different from that day on. But what Nina didn't know was that this encounter was only the beginning. The next day, she would learn who Darren really was, and why her mistake had drawn her into something far bigger than a simple misunderstanding at a restaurant. The next morning, the air in Greenport felt heavier than usual. The streets were still waking up, and Marley's Dine-In opened its doors as the sunlight spread across the glass windows. Nina arrived early, hoping for a quiet shift. She wanted to forget what had happened the day before, but the image of the calm woman and her husband kept coming back to her mind. She walked to the back room, tied her apron, and began setting up tables. Her coworker Ben noticed her silence. You look like you didn't sleep, he said. Nina gave a small smile. Yeah, just tired. Yesterday was a long day. Ben laughed lightly. You're always tired. But hey, Mr. Reeves told me someone important came asking for you. What was that about? Nina froze for a second. It was the husband of one of the customers. He only said a few words, but it was enough to make me think about how I act. Ben raised an eyebrow. He didn't cause trouble, right? No, nothing like that, Nina said quickly. He was calm, but the way he looked at me, it was like he could see right through me. Before Ben could reply, Mr. Reeves entered with a clipboard. Everyone listen up. We're expecting a few special guests today. The hotel next door is hosting a business meeting, and they've reserved 3 tables for lunch. Let's keep things smooth. Nina nodded and went back to her duties, trying to stay focused, but part of her still felt uneasy. Around noon, the restaurant started filling again. The door opened and a group of men in neat suits walked in. Their movements were quiet but confident. Behind them came a familiar face, and Darren, the same man who had visited the previous evening. Nina almost dropped her tray when she saw him. Mr. Reeves quickly greeted him. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome back, Darren nodded politely. Good afternoon. We'll take the same corner table. Mr. Reeves motioned for Nina to attend to them. She hesitated for a moment, then forced herself to walk over. Her hands felt cold. Welcome again, sir, she said carefully. Would you like to start with something to drink? Darren gave a small smile. Tea for me. Water for the rest. As she took the order, she noticed how the other men looked at him with quiet respect. They seemed to wait for his every word. There was something about his presence that made the air feel different, as if everyone had to be careful. When Nina returned to the counter, Ben whispered, Who are those people? I don't know, Nina said softly, but they don't seem like regular customers. When she served their drinks, Darren looked up. How is your day, Nina? The question made her blink. It's fine, sir. Thank you. I'm glad, he said. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable yesterday. I only wanted to remind you how words and behavior can affect others. We all learn that lesson in our own way. Nina nodded. Yes, sir. I've been thinking about it a lot. He smiled again, but this time his eyes seemed far away. My wife believes people can change when they realize the value of kindness. I hope you never forget that. His tone was kind but carried weight. She didn't know why, but she wanted to prove that she had learned her lesson. When the food came, Nina placed each plate carefully. The men thanked her politely, but they spoke little. Their conversation was quiet, full of short sentences and nods. She couldn't hear much, but she caught words like shipment, meeting, and schedule. It sounded like business talk, though something about their manner felt more serious than normal. After a while, Mara entered the restaurant. She wore a soft blue dress and carried a small purse. Her eyes found her husband immediately, and a warm smile spread across her face. Darren stood up at once, and the two greeted each other gently. The calm between them seemed strong, as if they shared a deep understanding. Nina watched from a distance. She couldn't help admiring how peaceful Mara looked. There was no sign of pride or anger in her expression, only calm confidence. When she approached to take Mara's order, Nina spoke softly. "Welcome back, ma'am. It's good to see you again." Mara smiled kindly. "Thank you. It's good to be back. And thank you for the tea yesterday. I hope today isn't as busy for you." Nina felt her chest lighten. "It's a little better. I'm sorry for yesterday. I shouldn't have spoken the way I did." Mara's eyes softened. "Apologies are valuable when they come from the heart. Don't be too hard on yourself. We all have difficult days." Nina nodded gratefully. "Thank you, ma'am." As she walked away, Darren watched the exchange quietly. His expression was thoughtful. After lunch, the couple stayed for a few minutes longer, speaking softly. The other men had already left, and the restaurant had calmed down. Darren called for the check, and as Nina brought it, he said, "You seem more at peace today." "Yes, sir." "I'm trying to be better," she said honestly. He nodded. "That's good. Every small choice matters." Before leaving, Mara turned back and said, "We'll visit again. The food is nice, and the place feels welcoming." Their words stayed with Nina long after they left. She had never met customers like them, polite yet powerful in their presence. She didn't understand who they really were, but she knew they carried influence. Later that evening, when she was cleaning up, two men came in. They weren't part of the usual crowd. They asked to see Mr. Reeves, and when he came out, they spoke in low voices. Nina could hear only parts of the conversation. "We're here on behalf of Mr. Darren," one man said. "He wanted to thank your staff for their service today. He values respectful workers." Mr. Reeves nodded carefully. "Please tell him it was an honor to serve him and his wife." The man handed him a small envelope. "This is for the staff." Then they left quietly. When Mr. Reeves opened it, he found several bills and a note. The note said, "For your team. Good service deserves appreciation." The staff was surprised. It was far more than an ordinary tip. Mr. Reeves decided to divide it equally among everyone. When he gave Nina her share, she stared at it in disbelief. "I don't know why he's doing this," she said softly. "Maybe because you showed respect today," Mr. Reeves replied. "Or maybe because his wife wanted it that way." That night, Nina walked home under the soft glow of the streetlights, holding the envelope tightly. She couldn't stop thinking about Darren and Mara. Something about them didn't fit into the picture of ordinary people. The way others treated Darren, the quiet power he carried, it all pointed to something more. Still, she didn't feel afraid anymore. Instead, she felt a strange sense of connection, like she had been given a lesson meant just for her. At home, she placed the envelope in a small drawer and looked out of the window. Life had a way of surprising her, and she had a feeling this wasn't the last time she would see them. What Nina didn't know was that in a quiet corner of the city, Darren was having a very different conversation. One of his men asked, "Do you want us to keep an eye on that place?" Darren thought for a moment. "No, it's a peaceful restaurant. Let it stay that way. But remember the name Nina. She has potential. People like her only need one good moment to change their life." The man nodded, and Darren leaned back in his chair, looking out at the city lights. His calm face revealed nothing, but his mind was full of plans. For Nina, it was just another day at work. For Darren and Mara, it was the beginning of something deeper that would soon pull her into a world she never imagined existed. A new week began in Greenport, and Marley's dine-in was busier than ever. The air smelled of fresh coffee and baked bread. Nina had changed a lot in the last few days. She smiled more, spoke gently to every customer, and handled mistakes with calm patience. Her coworkers noticed the difference. Ben teased her one morning. "You've turned into the kindest person in the restaurant. What happened to the Nina who used to roll her eyes at every order?" Nina laughed lightly. "Maybe I finally grew up. Or maybe someone taught me a quiet lesson." She didn't say the name, but everyone in the restaurant remembered the couple who had visited, Darren and Mara. Their calmness, their quiet strength, and the way they carried themselves had left an impression on the whole staff. As the clock reached noon, a delivery man arrived carrying a box addressed to Marley's dine-in. Mr. Reeves signed for it and called Nina over. "This one's for you," he said, handing her a small white envelope taped to the side. "For me?" she asked, surprised. "Yes, it has your name on it." She peeled it off carefully. Inside was a short note written in neat handwriting. "Thank you for your kindness. We'll see you again soon." Nina smiled softly. The letter was simple, but it warmed her heart. She looked at the box and asked, "What's inside?" Mr. Reeves opened it, revealing a selection of fine tea leaves, cookies, and small jars of honey. There was also a label that said, "From the Dalver Estate." Ben whistled. "That's fancy stuff. I've only seen that brand in high-end stores." Nina touched one of the jars, her curiosity growing. "Do you think it's from them?" Mr. Reeves nodded. "Most likely. They must have sent it as a thank you." The rest of the day went smoothly. Customers came and went. The restaurant buzzed with laughter, and the afternoon sunlight filled the room with warmth. But Nina couldn't stop thinking about that note. The more she thought about Mara's graceful manner and Darren's quiet authority, the more she wondered who they really were. When her shift ended, she walked home with the letter in her bag. The streets were calm, but her thoughts were busy. She wanted to know what kind of life those two lived. There was something mysterious about them. Not scary, but powerful in a quiet way. At home, she placed the letter on her small desk and looked out of her window. Her apartment was simple but neat. She had worked hard to pay her rent and take care of herself. But now, for the first time in a long while, she felt curious about something bigger than her own small world. The next morning, as Nina arrived at work, she noticed two men standing across the street near a black car. They didn't enter the restaurant, but seemed to be watching it. When she looked at them, one nodded politely. It didn't feel threatening, but it did make her uneasy. Later, during her lunch break, she told Ben what she saw. "Maybe they're from that group that came with Mr. Darren," he said. "I heard some people say he's a big businessman. You know, the kind who owns companies in other cities." Nina frowned. "He didn't look like an ordinary businessman. He had a different kind of energy." Ben shrugged. "Either way, I wouldn't worry. Maybe they're just security. Important people have that sometimes." That made sense, and Nina let it go for the moment. In the evening, Marley's dine-in was quiet again when the door opened and Mara walked in. She looked as graceful as ever, wearing a soft gray coat. Nina's face lit up when she saw her. "Welcome back, ma'am," she said warmly. "It's so nice to see you again." Mara smiled. "Thank you, Nina. It's nice to be back. May I have a cup of green tea?" "Of course," Nina said. When she brought the tea, Mara spoke gently. "I see you received the box." "Yes, I did," Nina replied. "Thank you so much. It was very thoughtful." Mara's eyes twinkled. "My husband wanted to send it. He said you have a good heart, even if you didn't see it at first." Nina felt her cheeks warm. "Please thank him for me." "I will," Mara said with a soft smile. "He rarely takes notice of people outside his circle, but he saw something different in you. He believes every person deserves a second chance to grow." Nina was touched by her words. "He seems like a very wise man." Mara looked out the window for a moment before replying. "He is, but his world is not easy. It's full of responsibility and decisions that affect many people. That's why he values peace wherever he can find it." Nina nodded slowly. "That explains why he speaks the way he does. Calm, but powerful." Mara smiled again. "You see things clearly now." They spoke for a few more minutes about simple things: work, weather, and life in Greenport. But before leaving, Mara said something that stayed in Nina's mind long after she left. Sometimes life brings people together for reasons we don't understand right away. You may not know it yet, but meeting us will change something in your path. That evening, Nina sat alone in her apartment, thinking about those words. She didn't know what they meant, but she felt they carried weight. The next day, something unexpected happened. A man in a suit entered the restaurant asking for Nina. He introduced himself as Mr. Hale and handed her a business card that read, Dalver Group Industries. "I work for Mr. Darren," he said kindly. "He asked me to deliver a message." Nina took the card carefully. "Is everything all right?" "Yes, of course," Mr. Hale said. "Mr. Darren is organizing a private event next week. He asked if you would be willing to assist with the service. It will be held at his home. He was impressed with your work here." Nina blinked in surprise. "At his home? I don't know if I should." Mr. Reeves stepped forward. "It sounds like a good opportunity, Nina. You've proven yourself, and it's an honor to be personally invited." Mr. Hale smiled. "It will be a formal dinner, nothing complicated, just a small gathering of guests." Nina hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right, I'll do it." Mr. Hale handed her an envelope with the details, address, time, and instructions. As he left, Ben whispered, "Looks like you're moving up in the world." Nina laughed nervously. "I'm not sure what to think, but I'll do my best." That night, she opened the envelope again at home. The address written on the paper was in the outskirts of the city near the hills. It was an area known for large estates and private homes. She folded the paper and placed it beside her teacup. She couldn't help feeling both nervous and curious. A week later, the day arrived. Nina wore her cleanest uniform and took a cab to the address. As the car drove through tall iron gates, her eyes widened. The driveway was long, lined with trimmed trees, and the mansion at the end looked grand but peaceful. She stepped out, holding her bag tightly. 2 security guards greeted her politely and guided her inside. The interior was elegant but not loud. Everything seemed calm and perfectly organized. Mara welcomed her at the entrance with a gentle smile. "I'm glad you came, Nina. You'll help serve dinner tonight. It's a small group of guests, nothing stressful." Nina nodded. "Thank you for inviting me. This place is beautiful." Mara led her to the dining area, where the table was already set. Silver plates, soft candles, and quiet music filled the air. Everything felt peaceful, yet powerful, like a place where important things happened without noise. When Darren entered the room, Nina felt the same quiet strength she had felt before. He gave a polite nod. "Good to see you again, Nina. Thank you for coming." "It's my honor, sir," she said respectfully. He smiled slightly. "Good. Tonight, just be yourself. That's all we ask." As the guests began to arrive, Nina started her work, unaware that by the end of the evening, she would uncover something about Darren and Mara that would change the way she saw them forever. The evening at the Dalver estate began with soft music and warm light. The large dining room was filled with calm conversation and the gentle sound of clinking glasses. Everything looked perfect, from the polished tableware to the fresh flowers arranged in tall vases. Nina moved quietly between the tables, placing plates and pouring drinks. She tried to stay calm, but her heart was still racing. It was her first time serving at a private event this grand. Every guest seemed important. The men spoke in low voices, and the women carried themselves with quiet confidence. Mara sat beside her husband, looking peaceful as always. Darren, on the other hand, seemed to control the room without even trying. When he spoke, everyone listened. When he was silent, no one dared interrupt. Nina noticed how everyone showed him deep respect. Even the oldest guests addressed him politely. She realized that his influence was far greater than she had imagined. As she placed a dish on the table, one guest whispered to another, "Mr. Darren's company expanded again last month. No one else can manage things the way he does." Nina tried not to eavesdrop, but she couldn't help hearing. She began to understand that Darren was not just a businessman, but someone who held quiet power over many people. After the first course, Mara signaled for Nina to step outside for a moment. They met near the kitchen doors. You're doing very well, Mara said kindly. You seem calmer now. Thank you, ma'am, Nina replied. I was nervous, but everyone has been polite, Mara smiled. You belong here more than you think. Some people are meant to cross paths for a reason. Nina didn't fully understand her words, but she nodded respectfully. I'm grateful for this chance. As the dinner continued, Darren stood and gave a short speech. He spoke about gratitude, trust, and loyalty. His tone was calm but meaningful. The guests listened closely, some nodding as if they knew exactly what he meant. When he finished, applause filled the room. Nina felt proud to be part of something so elegant. Later, when most of the guests were enjoying dessert, one of them called Nina over. This is wonderful tea, he said. Where did you learn to serve like this? Nina smiled shyly. I work at Marley's Dine-In, sir. It's a small restaurant in the city. I've been learning from experience, the man looked impressed. You have a good attitude. Keep working hard. People notice. Thank you, sir, she said politely. As the evening went on, the staff began clearing the tables. Nina helped carry the trays to the kitchen, where several cooks were cleaning up. Everything was peaceful until she accidentally knocked over a napkin holder that rolled under one of the counters. She bent down to pick it up and noticed a door slightly open at the back of the kitchen. It looked like a storage room, but she heard faint voices from inside. At first, she ignored it, but as she stood, she recognized one of the voices, Darren's. His calm tone carried clearly through the small opening. She didn't mean to listen, but his words made her pause. I don't want any mistakes this time, he said quietly. Everything must remain organized. Our name depends on it. Another voice replied, Yes, sir. We've already handled the issue. No one will notice anything unusual. Nina felt a strange chill run through her. It didn't sound like normal business talk, but Darren's voice wasn't angry or harsh. It was firm, like a man giving instructions for something important. She stepped away quickly, reminding herself that it was none of her business. Still, curiosity filled her mind. She had always thought of Darren as calm and kind, but now she realized he had a serious side that others feared to disappoint. After the event ended, Mara personally thanked every staff member. When it was Nina's turn, she smiled warmly. You did an excellent job tonight. I hope you'll come again if we ever need your help. Nina nodded respectfully. It would be an honor, ma'am. Darren came over soon after. You handled everything well, he said. You were calm, focused, and respectful. I appreciate that. Thank you, sir, she replied. He handed her a small envelope. A little something for your time and effort. Nina tried to refuse. Oh, no, sir, it's all right. I was paid for the evening. Darren shook his head. Accept it. Consider it a token of respect. She finally took it, thanking him quietly. When she got home that night, she opened the envelope and found not just money, but also a handwritten note. You have a good heart. Keep it pure, and it will lead you to places you never expected. She smiled, touched by the words. Over the next few days, life at Marley's Dine-In continued as usual. Nina worked hard, served customers, and tried to improve the restaurant's service. But her mind often wandered back to the Dalver estate. She couldn't stop thinking about what she had overheard that night. One afternoon, Mr. Reeves noticed her lost in thought. You're quiet today. Everything all right? Yes, sir, Nina said quickly. Just thinking about the event last week. He nodded. It must have been impressive. That man, Darren, is known for his generosity. I've heard his company helps fund schools and hospitals. Nina was surprised. Really? I didn't know that. Yes, Mr. Reeves said. He's one of those people who prefer to do good quietly. Not many know the full story. That made her smile. Maybe what she overheard wasn't something dark after all. Maybe it was just private business matters that required careful planning. That evening, as the restaurant started to close, a familiar car stopped outside. Darren stepped out and entered the restaurant. The staff looked surprised. Good evening, he said politely. I hope I'm not disturbing your closing hours. Mr. Reeves smiled. Not at all, sir. How may we help you? Darren looked at Nina. I came to ask a favor. We're hosting a charity dinner this weekend, and my wife requested that Nina assist again. She said the guests liked her service. Nina's heart jumped. Of course, sir. I'll be happy to help, Darren nodded. Good, it's for a children's hospital. We're hoping to raise funds quietly without public attention. Mr. Reeves said, That's a wonderful cause, sir. You can count on her. Darren smiled slightly. Thank you both. When he left, Ben whispered, You're becoming their favorite, Nina. She laughed nervously. I'm just doing my job. The next few days passed quickly. When the charity dinner arrived, Nina went to the mansion again. This time the atmosphere was livelier. There were colorful decorations, music, and cheerful laughter. The guests included families, doctors, and teachers. Everyone seemed genuinely happy. Nina helped serve food and drinks, and she noticed how Darren and Mara spoke kindly to every guest. They didn't act superior or distant. Instead, they treated everyone with warmth. When the dinner ended, Darren gave a small speech. He spoke about helping others, about kindness, and about building a better future for children. His words were simple but powerful. Mara stood beside him with a soft smile. We all have something to give, she said gently. Even the smallest act of care can change someone's life. The audience applauded, and Nina felt moved. She realized then that whatever mystery surrounded them, their hearts were genuine. As she helped clean up afterward, Mara approached her once more. You did wonderfully again, she said. I can see why my husband respects you. You remind him of someone he once knew, someone who believed in hard work and honesty. Nina smiled, feeling honored. Thank you, ma'am. I just try to do my best, Mara nodded. That's what makes you special. When Nina returned home that night, she placed the second note beside the first one in her drawer. She didn't know where life would take her next. But she felt that meeting Darren and Mara had changed her path forever. She still didn't know their full story, but she could feel one truth in her heart. Their kindness was real, and her mistake had led her to people who saw more in her than she ever saw in herself. But destiny wasn't finished with her yet. A new letter would arrive soon, one that would test everything she had learned so far. The morning sun rose gently over the city. Birds sang on the rooftops and the streets began to fill with life. Nina woke up early as usual and prepared for work. Everything seemed normal, yet something inside her felt different. Ever since she had worked at the Dalver mansion, she felt a quiet strength growing inside her. When she arrived at Marley's Dine-In, the restaurant was already busy. Ben was wiping the counter, and Mr. Reeves was checking the menu board. The familiar smell of coffee and pancakes filled the air. Good morning, Nina, Ben said cheerfully. You look bright today. Good morning, she replied. I slept well for the first time in days. Mr. Reeves looked up and smiled. You've been doing great lately. The customers like you. I'm proud of how far you've come. Thank you, sir, Nina said sincerely. I just try to stay focused. The day moved quickly. Customers came and went, and Nina stayed busy taking orders. Around noon, a young delivery boy entered the restaurant holding a small envelope. Is there a Nina here? He asked. That's me, she said, wiping her hands. He handed her the envelope. This was left for you at the front desk. She thanked him and looked at it curiously. The paper was thick and cream-colored, the same kind that Darren Dalver used for his notes. Her name was written neatly across the front. Nina stepped aside and opened it carefully. Inside was a letter written in elegant handwriting. Dear Nina, there is something we would like you to know. Please come to our home this evening. We have something important to share with you. Darren and Mara Dalver. Nina read the words twice, her heart beating faster. She couldn't imagine what it could be about. Still, she trusted them, so she decided to go after work. When the evening came, she dressed neatly and took a taxi to the Dalver estate. The gates opened as soon as she arrived. The house looked calm, with warm lights glowing through the windows. The butler greeted her kindly. Good evening, Miss Nina. They've been expecting you. He led her through the hallway to a quiet sitting room. Darren and Mara were waiting there, both smiling softly. Nina, we're glad you came, Mara said warmly. Please sit down. Nina sat carefully, her hands folded in her lap. You wanted to see me, ma'am? Darren nodded. Yes, there are some things you deserve to know. Mara looked at her husband, then turned to Nina. When we first met you, you were frightened and we understood why. But we also saw something special in you, honesty and courage. Thank you, Nina said, unsure what to add. Darren leaned forward slightly. Do you remember the night you came here to serve the dinner? You overheard something near the kitchen, didn't you? Nina froze. I didn't mean to, sir. I only heard a few words. I didn't tell anyone, I promise. He raised his hand gently. It's all right. We know you didn't mean to. In fact, that moment showed us that you are trustworthy. Nina looked surprised. Trustworthy? Mara smiled. Yes. We have to be careful with people we let near our family. Not because we are secretive, but because there are many who wish to harm us. Darren's voice grew calm and serious. You've probably heard rumors about me, Nina. Some people call me a businessman, others whisper stranger things. The truth lies somewhere between. Nina listened carefully. I was once part of a powerful circle, he said slowly. Not criminals, but people who managed things behind the scenes. Large deals, protection for small businesses, and keeping order where others failed. Years ago, it was not all clean work. But I stepped away from that life to build something honest with Mara. Mara reached for his hand. We wanted peace. We built our company and tried to help people quietly. Darren nodded. Still, some of those old connections never completely disappear. That is why we must be careful whom we trust. And that is why I'm telling you this. You are one of the few people I believe we can trust completely. Nina felt a wave of shock. You're saying you once led that world? He gave a small nod. Yes, many years ago. I made choices I'm not proud of. But I've spent every year since trying to make things right. We help orphanages, hospitals, and small businesses now. The dinner you served last week raised enough to build a new children's clinic, Mara added softly. You are part of that, Nina. Without you, that night would not have been such a success. Nina's eyes filled with emotion. I didn't do much, ma'am. I just served food. Mara shook her head gently. You did more than that. You carried kindness into every table you served. People noticed your sincerity. Darren smiled slightly. That's something money can't buy. The room fell quiet for a moment. Then Darren continued. There's another reason we asked you here. We would like to offer you a new opportunity. Nina blinked. An opportunity? Yes, he said. We are opening a new foundation that focuses on helping young people who come from humble backgrounds. We want you to help manage the hospitality side, the events, the outreach, and the communication with families. Nina's mouth fell open. Sir, I don't know if I'm qualified for that. I've only worked as a waitress. Mara smiled warmly. You have all the qualities we need. You're patient, hardworking, and honest. The rest you can learn. We'll provide training and guidance. Nina felt tears in her eyes. I don't know what to say. You've already done so much for me. Darren stood and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Then say yes and promise to keep walking the honest path you're on. Nina nodded, unable to speak. Yes, sir. I promise. Mara stood beside her and hugged her gently. Welcome to the family, Nina. The room filled with warmth and calm silence. For the first time in years, Nina felt that her hard work and faith had led her somewhere meaningful. That night, as she left the Dalver estate, she looked up at the stars. The air was cool and the streets were quiet. She thought about how her life had changed. A simple mistake at a restaurant had turned into a journey that taught her courage, forgiveness, and trust. When she reached home, she placed the new letter from Darren beside the old ones in her drawer. Each one felt like a piece of her new story. The next day, she went to Marley's dine-in to speak with Mr. Reeves. She told him everything about the offer. He listened with a proud smile. You deserve this, Nina, he said. You've earned every bit of it. I'll miss this place, she said softly. You'll always have a place here, he replied. But it's time you spread your wings. Her eyes grew misty as she thanked him for everything he had done. A week later, she began her new job at the Dalver Foundation. She worked under Mara's guidance and learned quickly. Her days were filled with purpose, organizing charity events, meeting families in need, and helping children get medical care. Every now and then, Darren would visit the office quietly. He never spoke much, but his presence carried strength. People respected him deeply, not because of fear, but because of his fairness. Nina admired how he carried both power and kindness together. She learned from him that true strength was not about control, but about protecting others. Months passed and the foundation grew. One evening, during a small ceremony, Darren announced that the children's clinic was finally complete. The crowd cheered as the lights of the new building shone brightly. Mara turned to Nina and said, Do you see that? This is what you helped build. Nina smiled, tears of happiness in her eyes. It feels wonderful to be part of something good. That's the real power, Mara said softly, turning pain into purpose. The music played. Laughter filled the air and the night ended with joy. Nina looked around and realized how far she had come. The world that once seemed cruel and unfair had given her new hope. She had started as a simple waitress who made a mistake, but through kindness and truth she had found a new life, one filled with trust, respect, and meaning, and deep down she knew that no matter what happened next, she would always carry the lesson Darren once told her: keep your heart pure, and it will lead you to places you never expected. The stars above seemed to shine brighter that night, as if blessing the journey she had begun.